Welcome, everyone, to another edition of IB Nation Sports Talk. I'm Vince D'Addario. That guy is Jesse Stiers. So we've upgraded from one Stiers to another, and Jesse is going to be joining me. You're going to be seeing this duo a little bit more starting tonight, frankly, because the Notre Dame women's basketball season actually starts tonight. And so Sean has his play-by-play duties that he's going to be taking care of, and I believe that game starts at 7 o'clock. And so on nights where he's either traveling or has a game, there will be no Sean Stiers. And so we will attempt to fill the shoes of the great Sean Stiers. And so we're going to give it our best shot. Jess, how you doing today?
I was doing good probably until about like 2 hours ago or so. New company, new dynamic, new kind of flow. There we have new project managers, and there's a multitude of them. And this guy today just like randomly called me and was like, "Hey, like, where is this at?" And I was like, "I didn't know that you wanted to send that out today." And he's like, "Well, I told them yesterday I was going to send it to him, and now it's today." And it's like, okay, but like you and I never had that conversation, so I don't know what
telepathy.
Yeah, I don't know what you want me to do on this one. And then he was like, "Oh, well, like, can you fix these things?" And he was increasingly getting frustrated. And I was like, again, no one reviewed this. No one said that this is what needed to go out today. And I was talking to one of my coworkers, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, like, don't they know on your resume that you know how to read minds?" And I was like, "You're right. I need to add that one."
Well, at least he appreciated that fact, that he knew that you couldn't read minds and that he was asking something of you that you had no idea, what was going on. So,
yeah. So long story short, I needed to scramble today at the end of the day to make sure that was finished on top of my other stuff. And I was got home a little bit late, just the day is running a little bit late. So how about you? How's your day been so far?
Hectic, lots of meetings today, lots of stuff, you know what I mean? Lots of what do I want to say here? Unscheduled stuff that just kind of, popped in. So, it is what it is. So, but here we are. This is the fun part of the day, Jesse. We get to just sit back, relax, talk a little Notre Dame football.
Especially on a bye week, right? Like there's not a lot going on. No one's up in arms about something. There's not a fire that needs to be put out. It's just
true.
You're coming off a pretty solid win.
Pretty
no
solid
injuries.
Stretch of wins, really.
Yeah, no injuries as of recent. You got your final third of the season, your final 4-pack of games to end out the season. And you could have probably argued at the beginning of the year that this would have been the hardest 4-pack of the season between Florida State, USC, Virginia, and I'm missing one other, but Florida State and USC were like projected top 20 teams at the beginning of the season, and now we've kind of gotten to the point where Florida State's no good, USC is just kind of mediocre, but those are kind of proven to be some of Marcus Freeman's toughest games. So I don't know if I'm confident, if I'm a little bit worried, a combination of the both, but whatever they got to do to go 1-0 the last 4 games is ultimately all I care about. Make the playoffs, especially after, the beginning of the season. But I was talking yesterday on the show. I'm glad that Northern Illinois loss happened in game 2 and not game 10, right? Like 100%. It still stings, but at least it was early in the season. I feel like now you can kind of remove that taste from a lot of people's mouths, which I think Notre Dame has done over the last few weeks as well.
Well, I think that's why they kind of rose up the AP poll here this past week, right? I mean, they jumped 4 spots. It was a decisive win against Navy, but, they've had decisive wins. I mean, this 3-game stretch has been fairly impressive for Notre Dame as far as the way they've been winning these games. And, the win at Georgia Tech, they actually dropped a spot. Technically, they were tied for 11th, and then they end up at 12, and now they're at 8. Which win was more impressive? Georgia Tech, Navy, both on the road, kind of hard to say, right? But they, for whatever reason, got more respect out of the Navy win, and now they're sitting at number 8. So not a bad spot to be if you're Notre Dame going into the second bye week of the season. And then, you just kind of gear up, like you said, for the final stretch. So a lot of good things happening for Notre Dame right now. Chance to get some of those bumps and bruises healed and, things of that nature. And then it's, on to Florida State, who we all thought that this would be quite the time for the bye week going into the Florida State game, but they might be 1-7 by the time the Irish face off against the old of Florida State. So I guess we'll kind of see where we're at once that game kicks off at like 7:30 in a couple of Saturdays. So, hey Jesse, before we get started with because we got some mailbag questions in here all of a sudden. It was a little late to the game with some people, but we got some mailbag question in, so I'm kind of excited about this. We got some good ones, so we'll get to those in just a second. But are you aware of MyBookie? Have you heard of that site yet?
I have heard of MyBookie, and I know that I was talking to my dad yesterday, and he said he's been doing some spots for him. And
yeah, Bubba.
We were talking, and I was like, "So does that mean they're giving you free bets? What's going on there?" Because I know a guy who could capitalize. And speaking of, I lost a freaking parlay last night by 1 point. 1 point, Vince. Do you know how much that makes me want to put my head into a wall?
Are you betting NBA?
Yeah, I was betting NBA, and it was a 4-leg parlay, and it was 4 guys' points, right? So all the other points hit, and Luka Doncic, I needed 25. He got 24, but Vince, the most frustrating part is he was 10 of 27 from the field. He had plenty of opportunities to get that last point. And the entire fourth quarter, I'm just watching ball after ball just roll around and out. But
that's brutal. You needed one more bucket. One more bucket. Well, I'm going to tell, for those that don't know about MyBookie, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Let's see here. So MyBookie is the sports book that's got your back. No fluff, no second guessing, just straight up action with you in total control. Think you're going to roll the dice with the other guys? Well, good luck to you. At MyBookie, it's never been about guessing. It's about giving you the edge. So every bet you place comes with confidence and a plan. So if you know football and love to win, MyBookie was made for you. And all you have to do, if you're new to MyBookie, just use our promo code IRISH, and they'll double your bankroll with a 100% deposit bonus right from the jump. That's more money and more power to make winning plays. If you've already used MyBookie, which some of you may have done so far, there's a new loyalty rewards program, and so now you can earn extra cash just for doing what you do. Again, more plays, more wins, more cash in your account, no strings attached. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere. I don't know if that means Ohio or not, Jesse. You might want to look into this one. With MyBookie, the sports book that gives you control and rewards you for every moment of play. So everybody needs to go check out MyBookie and use promo code IRISH to double up on where you're at. Double up your first deposit. So
speaking of, I was in Covington, Kentucky this weekend, which is just over the bridge outside of Cincinnati.
Yep.
And it was awesome because I could bet college player props. So I parlayed Notre Dame to score on its first drive with Riley Leonard to score the first Notre Dame team touchdown. And what happened? Riley Leonard ran a QB sneak on the first drive and got the touchdown. So I hit a nice little plus 700 parlay to get my Saturday going.
Nice.
And it was a welcome back to college player props because
for you.
Yeah, because we all know how stupid Ohio is.
Yeah, you need to really think about your living situation.
Well, it's probably going to change within the next
that's a
year and a half.
Yeah, it's a definite possibility from what I hear. So, but yeah, I mean, if you can't bet college player props, then what's the point of even living there?
Yeah, like what am I going to do? Call up my local favorite college player and tell him to, not run for 100 yards? Like, you think I have that much influence?
I mean, Ohio State is in that state, so I mean, it's definitely a possibility that could have happened at one point or another. Sorry, Archer, but wouldn't be the first time that Ohio State has gotten in trouble for some stuff. But hey, whatever. I digress.
You digress.
But yeah, I hit a 7-legger, baby, and Notre Dame was good to me on Saturday. So 7 legs, which paid out a decent sum for me. It got me back to feeling good about my my total, my
Your net.
bankroll. Yeah, my net. Because I've never bet my own money. I was given a gift card one time, and I've been using that for like the last 3 years. So I'm just like house money, just using house money. Well, I got up to a certain amount and it felt really good. And then it just dropped and dropped. And I was just having some terrible luck. And it's pretty low. And then I placed this one on Saturday, and boom, just like that, I'm back to where I was. Back, baby. I'm back. And then I shut it down for the rest of the day. That was
There's no better feeling.
Shut it down. So feeling pretty good about the whole situation. So yeah. But hey, again, only bet what you can afford, folks. It's for fun. Don't get crazy. Like I said, I bet with house money. My wife would kill me if I ever used my own money for betting. Like, it would not end well. It would not end well at all. So, all right, Jess, you ready to get into some mailbag questions? We got a decent chunk here. Start up.
Yeah. Just to let you know, I don't have any more of the like starring or
you have no capabilities, huh?
Privileges. So just to let you know, you got to work that much harder tonight.
All right, fine. All right,
so we got to bring it up though. I'll read it and then we can go from there.
I like where your head's at. All right, we got a super chat that we will start off with from Tyler Evans.
Tyler Evans wants us to rank all 4 Power 4 conferences by entertainment this season. Ooh. I will start by saying the ACC is last.
That's fair. That's fair.
I will say the SEC is first. Okay. I think they've had the most quality games amongst the SEC. And then I would actually put the Big 12 over the Big 10 at this moment. So my rankings would go SEC, Big 12, Big 10, ACC. I'm not a fan of the Big 10. I don't think that their season is largely kind of comes down to the end, right? Like, I feel like the only big 10 game I've watched so far is Ohio State and Oregon. And that's really my basis. I like, there's a lot of Big 10 games coming up to end the season, right? Like Michigan, Ohio State and Penn State is this weekend, IU and Ohio State. And I think there's more to come, but I haven't been impressed with the Big 10 so far.
Fair. Yeah. Big 10 is just kind of boring football, but it kind of always has been that way. I don't know.
That's why it doesn't really feel any different.
Yeah, and then they got all these new teams that are involved, and I don't think the football has gotten a whole lot better, if I'm being honest. I just haven't been that impressed with it, so it hasn't been all that entertaining. Now, the SEC has been entertaining because you've got pretty solid teams playing against each other, and those games have been pretty good football games. And so, I'm thinking about the actual football games themselves, right? I mean, LSU, Texas A&M this past weekend. It was a pretty entertaining game, right? And now we were all dialed in because it was Brian Kelly versus a team that Notre Dame's already beaten. And so everybody's rooting, I would assume, for the most part, for Texas A&M to win that game. And so, I think that was entertaining. Stymie says Vanderbilt was carrying the entertainment for the SEC. They were certainly entertaining when they played Alabama. There's no doubt about that. I think everybody got on board at that point, and they've played well since then as well. So, except for when they played Ball State. I don't know what happened there, but they still won the game, and that's what matters. But being tied going into the fourth quarter was a little concerning if you're a Commodore fan. But I think I would agree with your assessment there. I think 2 and 3 could be rotated if you wanted to. You know what I mean? I think we're splitting hairs at that point, but I think the SEC kind of takes it by a long shot at the top as far as for entertainment purposes. Games I actually want to watch.
Yeah,
pretty much been in the SEC. So, yeah, we'll swear on that with that. Good question, Tyler. Appreciate the super chat very, very much. Let's see here. Let's see what else we got.
Chris wants to know, with Notre Dame at number 8 in the AP poll, what is a realistic expectation for seeding at the end of the year, barring complete chaos?
This is a good question because now we're wanting to project what is going to happen. Because, like, obviously, if the season ended now, they would be the 9 seed. and they would be hosting Tennessee, going off of the AP poll. Okay. And then they would play Oregon if they won that game. So not an ideal path. You want Notre Dame, you want them to be 5 through 8 so that they're at least hosting the first round. I think that's definitely ideal, right? I think realistically, Notre Dame at the high point could probably get to maybe 6. But I think 6 or 7 would be great because I think there is going to be a little bit of chaos ahead of them. I think teams are going to fall back behind them. And Notre Dame is just, granted, this is assuming Notre Dame takes care of business, goes 11-1. I think the highest they're going to be able to go is probably 6. I would be surprised if they got to 5. But I think realistically 6 or 7, I feel pretty good about. What about you?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Notre Dame's the range that they're going to fall in is 5 to 8. And that's assuming they win the remaining of their games. I think Oregon's going to remain at number 1. I think they're going to finish out the season.
Think they're going to beat Ohio State again?
I think they're going to finish out the season undefeated. Ohio State still has two tough games between Penn State and IU. So I kind of want to see how that goes. But I think Oregon will be in the Big Ten championship undefeated. Georgia still has Ole Miss and Tennessee to end their season. So Georgia and Tennessee will take care of each other. One of those teams will have 2 losses, so they kind of drop out. Penn State and Ohio State, those 2 will take care of each other in some fashion. So I think one of those teams will drop out. So that kind of automatically, bumps up Notre Dame, realistically 2 spots already from where they're at, assuming they go undefeated. So that's already at 6. And then you start to look at Miami and the ACC. Who do they have to finish the season? Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Syracuse. I mean, on paper, they should go undefeated and they should win the ACC. So I'm just going to assume kind of what that's what happens. I think Texas, Georgia, and Texas A&M are going to figure out kind of the SEC championship. But I think Georgia is going to ultimately win it all. So I see, long story short, I know I'm kind of probably talking in circles here.
That's all right.
I'm just kind of looking at everyone and their schedule as we're going here. I think the best that Notre Dame could do is 6. And I think that that if they lose, they're out of the playoffs. So I'm just going to assume Notre Dame, goes undefeated. And some of those other things that I just mentioned happens around them. So I think Notre Dame ends up right in that 6th spot. And I don't think that they will be any lower than 9. And really, I don't care as long as they host a game. Whatever gets them into a hosting area seed, that's kind of really all I care about. So I think I'll make my official prediction. I think Notre Dame finishes number 6 in the final rankings.
Okay. So they have a 6th seed. Is what you're saying. Okay. Because there's definitely, like, right now, if the season ended right now, the reason that Notre Dame would be the 9 seed is because the Big 12 champion is ranked behind Notre Dame, but they would leapfrog into one of those top 4 spots, and then that pushes everybody else down, right? So they may finish more highly ranked than 6. Like, that's a possibility, but then they could still be the 6th seed because of the way that the conference champions have to be 1 through 4. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you're saying 6th seed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I 5 or 6 is really what I'm hoping for. Obviously 5, I think, might be a pipe dream depending on what happens in front of them. But I would love for them to obviously either be playing the 11 or 12. I mean, that's obvious what you would want to do, right? But then more importantly, I think then you're either going to get the ACC champion or the Big 12 champion, because I think SEC and Big 10 are going to be 1, 2, depending on whatever order you want to put them in, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think it's going to be ACC and Big 12. And so if you're 5 or 6, you're going to get one of those 2 teams in the second round. Notre Dame, I think, is better than whoever the ACC is going to produce. And I think they're better than whoever the Big 12 is going to produce as a conference champion. So I like that second round matchup. And then once you're in the Final Four, all bets are off and it's good teams remaining, right? So That's why I'm hoping for 5 or 6. I mean, look, I'll take 7 or 8, is like you said, as long as they're hosting. But I like the chances of them if they have the ACC or the Big 12 champ in the second round. All right, let's see here. Let's go with this one.
Who do you think wins the Big Ten?
Oh man, I think if Ohio State and Oregon face off again in the championship, I think Ohio State gets them.
So then that comes down to, I agree, and I think that Oregon beats IU or Penn State if it's either one of those teams in the Big Ten championship. What I'm rooting for most is Ohio State to lose to either Penn State or IU, not make the Big Ten championship, and then the Big Ten championship be like Oregon versus IU or Oregon versus maybe Penn State. But I would love to see Ohio State lose a second game and fall out of the first.
Well, they would fall out of the top 4, but they're still getting in.
You think so?
I do. Yeah. I think they get in with 2 losses. Maybe. Well, it really depends on what else is there. Because are they losing to both Penn State and IU? Because if obviously that's the case, then they're out.
Yeah.
If they beat one of those 2 teams, then they're out of the Big Ten championship. But I think they're still in contention for going on the road in the first round. You know?
That would stink if they got like the 12 and Notre Dame got like
5.
the 6 or 5. And and they had to play first round.
I know, right? Because everybody assumes that the 12 is going to be like, Boise State or whoever the group of 5 is. And that's not necessarily the case. If it happens to be a good group of 5 team and they are ranked in the top 10, I mean, they could potentially be in the top 4. And then the 5th conference champion would be someplace else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, there's an outside chance that Boise State is ranked higher than whoever the Big 12 champion is. That's not out of the realm of possibility, right? If Boise State runs the table, that's definitely possible. And then Boise State has a top 4. And then, whoever BYU, Kansas State, whoever it happens to be is hosting a game in the first round. So that would be unfortunate for a Power 4 conference champion to have to host the first round. That would be rough. That would be rough. So, okay, let's see here. Let's jump on this one because there's a couple of questions I think that kind of have to do with this one. Let me see here. I'll throw this one up, but I think there's other ones that have to do with this one. So Joe has a question about Notre Dame and conference affiliation.
Joe wants to know, any chance the committee locks out Notre Dame to force them to join a conference?
And then there's this one from Andre, which is along those same lines.
What if Notre Dame doesn't get in the 12-team college football playoff at 11-1? Would this cause another game to reconsidering?
And it's basically, are they going to join a conference because of that?
The answer is quite simply no. And I think that is because Jack Swarbrick decided, he had his hands and, basically creating a path for Notre Dame outside. Listen, a 2-loss Notre Dame team is not going to get into the playoff because they're not in a conference. But an undefeated or a 1-loss Notre Dame team, regardless of a conference, I think is a 90% chance. Well, undefeated is 100% chance that they're going to make the playoff every year.
Sure.
1-loss Notre Dame team, I think you could still put the odds at 80 to 90% that they will get into, the college football playoff. So
in any given year, not just this year, but any
given year.
That's the way you have to look at this, right? This is big picture. Whether you're going to join a conference or not, you can't just focus on this season. You have to look at the odds and everything else for the entire, big picture stuff, right?
Yeah. So I think every year Notre Dame, they don't get the luxury of having 2 losses because they're not in a conference. But I think as long as they are a 1-loss or an undefeated team, 90% of the time they're going to be in the college football playoff. But I think the only way that the non-conference thing comes into play is when they have 2 losses, and now you're comparing a 2-loss Notre Dame team with maybe a 2-loss Ohio State team. Well, then I think they're going to pick Ohio State over, Notre Dame, especially if Ohio State loses in a conference championship or loses to, two other teams that are already in the playoffs. So to me, it comes down to the 2-loss situation and the conference, being relevant. But that is what Jack Swarbrick kind of fought for, and the framework that he laid for Notre Dame and the path that he laid for Notre Dame. So I think that there is always a chance for Notre Dame to be in the playoff, regardless if they're in a conference or not.
Yeah, I agree with the odds thing. I mean, like you said, you have to look big picture on this, and more often than not, a one-loss Notre Dame team has a great shot of getting into the playoff. A great shot. And, I don't think that the committee, because even, who was it? Matt 2011 GT is 100% right. In the history of the college football playoff, the committee has never snubbed Notre Dame for not being in a conference. That has never happened. I would actually say it's the complete opposite direction. I think the committee has been very generous towards Notre Dame in the 14 playoff, and I don't see that changing in the 12-team playoff, to be perfectly honest with you. That's one of the reasons that I'm so confident that a one-loss Notre Dame team is getting in. And your dad and I had a little disagreement on the show a few days ago about, the chances of all these one-loss Big Ten teams and all of these different things. And, and you compare resumes and da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, I get that. Number one, I don't know that that's really mathematically plausible. Like, I don't know that that's actually going to take place. But at the same time, I just don't see them leaving out an 11-1 Notre Dame football team. And I think that's going to be the case way more often than not. And so what's the advantage of joining a conference if you're Notre Dame? I still don't see how the pros outweigh the cons of joining a conference. I don't see it. So would the conversation maybe struck? Sure. You can have that conversation, but I still don't think it's going to push them into a conference.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
All right, let's see what else we got here. Let's get rid of that one. Let's go with right here. It's kind of a thought question here.
So Tristan wants to know, during this bye week, has the scouting staff already started looking at potential playoff teams? I'll start with this one. I don't think that. I would just say no, because I think there's so much uncertainty to where Notre Dame is going to be playing or who they're going to be playing, right? Like, not let alone what their seed is going to be, if they're going to be hosting, But then you throw in like the last component of that and who they're playing. I just don't see it. Like, that could be just a colossal waste of time, I think, at the end of the day, right? So I think there's I think maybe as the season goes down and they get into the last week, or, then you might start, potentially looking at matchups, but I just think there's too much uncertainty to get into that. And I think it would be a waste of some people's time at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. There's too many variables right now for you to even narrow down who you might be facing off against in the playoff. Like, this might be a question like going into the USC game when the picture maybe is a little bit more clear, that kind of a thing. Maybe that's a possibility. But man, I just don't think that that's a good, like you said, I don't think that's a good use of your available tools right now, because you just don't know. I mean, there's so many variables to this whole thing. It's not great. Like, not even basketball teams start preparing for all the teams that they could possibly, face off against when you're only a little over halfway through the season. And that's really what the reality is, right? We just had game 7. We're not. I'm sorry, game 8. Excuse me. Like, you're what? What is that? 2/3 of the way through the season. Nobody's preparing for the postseason at this point, because a lot of things can happen, and maybe you don't even make it. And so now you've really wasted your time on that one. So yeah, that's probably not going to happen for another month or so, would be my guess. So here's the other thing. Even after Notre Dame plays USC and they are 11-1 and they're feeling good about where things are, the picture is a little bit clear, but you still have to see the conference championship games. And there's still a lot of stuff that you can narrow it down, but there's a lot of prep that you would do that would end up being a waste of time even at that point. And that's a month from now. So, yeah, I don't think that's going to be the case. All right, let's see here. Here's a good one for overall college football.
What upset do you really want to see this weekend? I really want to see Penn State beat Ohio State this weekend.
I just kind of want Penn State out at this point. They're not a team that scares me by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, look, would I rather play Penn State than play Ohio State in the playoffs? Sure, because I think they're going to whoop up on Penn State. Like I'm not afraid of Penn State in any way. I'm certainly not afraid of their head coach. Not that I'm deathly afraid of Ohio State's head coach either, but if you're putting the two together, I would rather face off against James Franklin than Ryan Day to get a win. So I just kind of want Penn State to fall by the wayside, and let's let the true Penn State colors show at this point. Like that's where I'm at. So I guess I can't pick that one because I do think that's going to be potentially the best game of the weekend. Because
there's some other good ones on there though too.
Right, what do you got? What do you got?
Duke at Miami. Duke is 6-2. Miami is 8-0. Obviously,
I would love to see that one. Actually,
that's a good game to potentially, see Miami go down. Another one. This is how you might find it interesting. You might not. I number one, Oregon at 5-3 Michigan. I think that has some interesting
potentially.
Yeah, like that could go either one of two of one ways, right? That could go two ways. Oregon just shellacks Michigan. But part of me thinks since Michigan's at home, they've kind of struggled. I think they're going to make that a good game. And then the last one would be 5-3 Louisville at 6-1 Clemson. So two ACC matchups that I'm really interested in. Duke and Miami and Louisville and Clemson. But I mean those are all the undercards. The main event for me is Ohio State and Penn State.
I would love for random Florida to jump up and bite and get Georgia and just knock them out completely. That would be great. That would be great because Georgia would fall like a rock if they lost to Florida. Now that's at Georgia, so the odds of that happening are pretty darn slim, but a guy can dream. So that's the one I would love to see. If we're talking about upsets, that's the upset that I would love to see.
What's your you have an upset of the week? Something that you're
one that I'm actually calling to happen?
Yeah.
You know what? Here's the upset I'll call just for fun. And it's probably going to annoy a lot of my neighbors, and I don't really care. I'm taking Michigan State over IU.
Ooh. I do like that matchup too. And I think that Michigan State, I like their coach. He's the guy who came from
Oregon State.
And I think he had a mess to clean up, but they're a pretty solid team considering where he kind of picked up the pieces at. And I think they're going to be a lot tougher than what they're given credit for. And the other thing that's interesting to me is now there's tape on that IU backup quarterback, right? Because I think another week to kind of see, Washington didn't know what that was going to look like.
Sure.
Right. And I think that Michigan State has an advantage now because I think IU's quarterback is going to be out one more week, and then they have the bye, and then they'll go into the rest of their schedule. So he should be back after that. This is kind of their big test, I think, before they get him back. And again, I know it sounds, maybe cheesy or whatever, but having film on a guy just for a week, I think can be, can provide some sort of support. So I do like that game. I like that prediction. My upset's going to be Louisville over Clemson. I think Louisville's played in a lot of tough, close games. They've already lost to Notre Dame. They've lost to Miami. I can't remember who their third loss was to. But they played good teams, and they've played close against good teams, and I think they're finally going to get one against Clemson.
I hope so. That would be great. To be honest with you, at this point, I kind of want Miami to win out, but I would love for Louisville to beat Clemson. If that happens, then I think you're potentially looking at the ACC being the one bid league going into the playoff. It's possible. So But that's what would have to happen. There's going to have to be a stretch. There's going to have to be a chasm between 1 and 2. And then, of course, Miami's going to have to take care of business in the championship game, too. Otherwise, you're going to get a stolen bid, which is, if you're a Notre Dame fan, that's not what you want.
We do not want bid steals.
No, that hurts a team like Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Because you're not going to get an automatic bid by winning your conference, even though they're the best independent team in the country. You're not going to get anything automatic. So you don't want any bid steals. You want all the favorites to win those conference championships. You want
undefeated favorites to win the conference championships.
Yes. No doubt about that. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Something we can have a little bit of fun with. Oh, let's see. Here we go. How about this one from Christopher?
Given the jump the Notre Dame offense made after the last bye week, do you think we will see similar jump from them out of this bye week? My philosophy on the offense is every week you're building, right, Vince? Like, you, as an offensive coordinator, you have your base plays that you will install during camp. You'll install first couple weeks of the season, and that's primarily what you are going to run, right? Like, that's why you call it your base. But as you go on, smart offensive coordinators will start to continue and develop plays or develops looks off of your base plays, right? Like, you've showed this base play, and all of a sudden you add maybe a wrinkle on it, a play action, or maybe you roll out, or a guy, runs a slightly different, whatever it might be. You have to start adding kind of deception to your plays as the season goes on. And so I think Notre Dame, first and foremost, what they get from the bye week is just rest, right? Like, I think any team coming off rest is going to play better. But, we've heard Denbrock and Riley Leonard talk throughout the season how this is a working progression. They're building off of things week by week. And I still believe that Notre Dame's best version of themselves on offense is still to come, solely because of that reason. They continue to build off of, they basically have a playbook of plays. Okay, this is the good stuff and this is the bad stuff, right? Like, this is the stuff we're good at doing, and this is the stuff that maybe Riley Leonard isn't quite as good at. But the main thing I'm looking for is the first point that I hit on is them just developing kind of, newer plays or concepts off of some of those base plays that they have, or maybe when they get in the red zone, developing some red zone plays that they haven't shown on tape yet either, right? Like, those are the stuff that you have to keep fresh so you can keep, scoring, because Notre Dame is really good in the red zone, and a lot of that has to do with Riley Leonard's running ability. But the more deception that you can get in the red zone, or the more plays that you can run that you necessarily haven't shown yet, that's the main thing that I'm looking for, especially coming out of the bye week, because as an offensive coordinator, you have time to kind of sit down and go over film and decide, what's working for us and what can we build off of.
Tendencies, man. This is where you figure out what your tendencies are and you try to break them. And I think there is going to be a bit of an offensive jump. I don't know that it's going to be as significant as it was after the first bye week, but I think there is going to be a jump. So I think that's something that everybody needs to be paying attention to, because if this offense gets even better, it's going to be scary. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. How about this one from ND Sailor?
Will the O-line stay the same as we saw versus Navy? This is going to be, Vincent, I have to admit this. I was playing golf while watching the entire Notre Dame and Navy game, and I can't say that I was particularly tuned into who was on the offensive line. Was there
Jesse Stiers?
Was there a bit of shuffle on the offensive line this week?
Billy Stroud started at left guard instead of Sam Pendleton. Big difference.
And I would say that we are going to see the same offensive line if they felt the need to change it, and said replacement performed much better than the last guy. So
yeah,
for that reason, I have to give you the tip of my cap for helping me on that one. But
no problem.
I think it has to stay the same when you have the performance Notre Dame did. And a lot of the issues that they were kind of running into on the offensive line was at the guard position. And so I think the tackles, listen, the whole offensive line has had their struggles and ups and downs, but I'd say the tackles have been the most consistent, and I think the guards have been the least consistent. And so the fact that they've kind of rotated someone out and found a new groove, I think they're going to stick with it.
Well, look, Billy Stroud is arguably your best offensive lineman going into this year, and him getting injured was a huge blow to this team. And now he's back, and I'm not even sure if he's completely 100%, but he's good enough that he's still your best offensive lineman. And the fact that they plugged him in where they did, I think makes a lot of sense. I think now he can be a sounding board and everything else for Anthony Knapp, who's now next to him, because now you have a veteran next to a true freshman. And I think that's can only help this offensive line. And we saw it in this game and how it helped. And so I think that's only going to continue to help as they move forward. So barring injury, I don't see them making any more changes to the offensive line. Look, all of the Gerby Lambert fans that are out there, look, he's going to be really, really good for Notre Dame, but he didn't even come in for the second team. So he's not coming in during the bye week as much as you would want him to. We'll see him soon enough. And I think there's going to be some major competition on the offensive line next spring and fall. But in the meantime, during the 24 season, I just don't see any more changes for the offensive line. And I think this combination of 5 offensive linemen could prove to be a good group. Like, you could be a good offensive line with this group. Not elite, not amazing, but I think good to very good if they can just stay together and continue to work together and all of that. So I think that's an important piece of this as well. How about this one from Andre?
Andre wants to know, what team on the remaining schedule are you most concerned with? Vince, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, for a minute, for a few weeks, I wanted to say, hey, just be careful of Florida State. It's still Florida State, but they continue to be unimpressive, and they continue to just not be a good football team. And so I think the answer to this one for me is USC. They still have a ton of athletes. They still have a guy who knows how to call an offense. I think that they're a solid football team. They are not a great football team. They can still bite you. They can still get you, especially in their house in the last game of the season. And what do they have to play for at that point, except to ruin the season for Notre Dame? And in a rivalry game, and this is a rivalry game, sometimes that's what you play for, man, ruining the other team's season. So I will not be comfortable with the USC situation until the game is in hand. I'm not saying the game over. I'm saying game in hand. So we'll have to wait and see. But that's the team that scares me the most.
So the team that scares me the least is going to be Florida State. And it's crazy to say that, considering, where they were at, what they were projected to be at the beginning of the season. USC, I think on paper, scares me the most because they have the most athletes. They still have a lot of talent. They still have, a really good quarterback, a really good offensive-minded head coach. It's at USC, which I never enjoy as well.
Right.
And I hate that last game of the season at USC, always around Thanksgiving as well.
I know, right?
And so then that kind of leaves Virginia and Army. Army, I would be more worried about if they hadn't just played Navy. I felt like Navy was the better of the triple option teams, and so I felt like they got a little bit of pre-practice for Army, right? And I think that Navy does a little bit more, like running the triple option out of the shotgun. Army doesn't do nearly as much as that. So honestly, though, I think I'm gonna have to go with Virginia. I think Virginia is kind of, Notre Dame has played Virginia really close the last few times that they've played. Back in 2021, Notre Dame won by 3. Back in 2019, Notre Dame won by 1. And then back in 2018, Notre Dame won by 22. And then back in 2016, they won by 3 again. So 3 of those games, Notre Dame has won by no more than 3 points, right? So they played Virginia 4 times. 3 of those games have come down to a field goal or less. It just always seems like, I don't know, it just feels like maybe one of those kind of end of season forgotten about trap games because you're going to be playing Army in the triple option. You're going to have to go to USC to wrap up the season and ultimately get your, if you win that game against USC, you're basically guaranteeing you got a playoff selection, right? So like that's going to be the motivation for the USC game. So I just feel like that Virginia game, it just kind of screams trap door to me. And then, it could be the Chris Tyree revenge game as well as homecoming back to Notre Dame.
True. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Look, Notre Dame has proven they can't take anybody lightly, right? They have to take everybody seriously, and they obviously know they got to go 4-0 here down the stretch. If they don't go 4-0, season's over. So it'll be very interesting to see how these guys come out and play in these games and how Marcus Freeman has them ready to roll. I think that's an important piece of this, right? We'll get to a few more before we get to the old rapid fire. How about this one from Joe?
Assumption: Notre Dame wins out. Still worried about Florida State. Call me crazy. Do we need all of our remaining and past opponents to not lose anymore either?
I think the short answer is no. You don't need every team that you've ever played this season to continue to win. You want that to be the case. And I think we should all root as hard as possible for Texas A&M to keep doing what they're doing. I think that's an important piece of this because they've got probably the toughest strength of schedule left. And so the better that they do, the better that opening, season win looks, especially since you did it at their place. I think they would really be the only team that I'm super rooting for. I'll continue to root for the service academies and things like that because I think it's fun to watch them make some noise nationally. Other than that, it'd be great if Louisville would upset Clemson, things like that. Yeah, that would help, but I don't think it's necessary at this point. It'll help the resume. It'll be great. If it comes down to Notre Dame and another team, maybe on the bubble, then great. But I'm thinking that 11 wins will get them in regardless of the strength of it. But again, it doesn't hurt if those teams are winning. Doesn't hurt you, but I don't think you need it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I would like pretty much 100% agree with you saying. I think Notre Dame is in control of its own destiny. They don't need anyone to win or lose. 11-1 gets them in. However, I do believe that Texas A&M is ultimately what gave Notre Dame the boost in their rankings this past week. Them beating LSU and continuing to only have one loss to Notre Dame. So I think this question predominantly applies to Texas A&M. And I think the further Texas A&M goes, the higher the seed that Notre Dame ultimately gets at 11-1. I think that's where I'd be willing to go with this. I think if best case scenario, Texas A&M just runs the table and wins the whole damn SEC, and their only loss was to Notre Dame. Because I think you can make the argument at that point that Notre Dame should be a 6 or 5 seed, considering that the SEC champion, who everyone considers to be the best conference in football, their only loss was to Notre Dame. And then I know the conversation. Well, it was the first game of the season. Well, buddy, I got news for you. It was Notre Dame's first game of the season as well. And I think their offense is in a much better place now, especially their offensive line, than what it was at the beginning of the season as well. So, I just think that Notre Dame is in charge of its own destiny at 11-1. But the more that Texas A&M can win, that's only going to bolster Notre Dame's seed that much higher.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. Let's get to this last question. This will be a pretty quick one, and then we'll jump into the next segment.
Oh, Andre wants to know, Vince, is your son going to commit to a school soon?
The short answer is not soon enough. Dad is very anxious about the entire situation, but I
wonder who Dad is.
Yeah,
Who's that guy?
I keep getting reminded that specialist offers come later, like in December and January. He's got one offer in the bag at the moment, and that's where we're going to head here on the bye week. But we are hopeful that at least a handful more will be coming in. But a lot of the schools that he is looking at they tend to send out their offers once their season is over. So we're talking like December, January time frame, just enough time to make a rush decision so that it's ready for National Signing Day. That's basically, where we're at with everything. So for those of you that have kids that are, or yourself, maybe you remember this as well, college applications, that initial due date, that's November 1st. And that is Friday.
Yeah, so like that was the crappy part about getting recruited by multiple schools, and then also kind of maybe even considering, is this what I want to do? Is you basically had a football route, and that was applying to every school that you like had, I would say relations with or recruits with, right? Like if they've recruited you, you've done on visits, you've had multiple conversations. It was like, all right, well, I got to apply to this school because I have to be ready in the chance that they do offer. And then there was always say no one offers, and I really don't want to go through with the whole thing. And maybe I just go to school to, go to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a handful of places that I just applied to as well, where I was like, all right, well, this is what I'll fall back onto and just go to a nice, state school. And this will probably maybe rub people the wrong way, but, the dream was to always, go play football at Notre Dame and be a student athlete at Notre Dame. But, as you mature, reality hits, and I wasn't probably quite smart enough to go to Notre Dame. And obviously I wasn't as athletically gifted to go to Notre Dame, but I wanted to be an engineer and I wanted to go to a good engineering school, but I couldn't stand the thought of going to Purdue. So my top school outside of, playing sports is I wanted to go to Michigan State because they had a really good engineering school, it was a really good state school, and heard a lot of good things about it. But that was kind of my fallback plan, was I was going to go on to be a Michigan State Spartan.
There we go. It's like I said, we're doing the whole college application process thing right now. He's applied to 12 schools, to your point, because you've got your academic bucket, if you're going to go to school just for academics, and then you got your football bucket. And unfortunately, none of those schools overlapped. Yeah. Not one of them overlaps.
It would have been sweet because worst, like best case is like, all right, let's just go to Michigan State, and like maybe you've been getting recruited by him, and then you're like, all right, well, maybe could be like a preferred walk-on, right? Like you could work hard, train, and that was like, if you felt slighted or overlooked, well, as a preferred walk-on, if you work your way on and the coaches see you and you prove yourself that you can play, then you can eventually work towards a scholarship. But yeah, I'm like you. I wanted to see that overlap of maybe a school that had interest, but was a good academic fit, and was like maybe they weren't going to give a scholarship, so like you could go that route of like being a preferred walk-on essentially.
Yep. Yeah, I can guarantee everybody Notre Dame is on the list. That application went in. And then your obvious schools that most high school kids, are applying to, IU, Purdue, those are all on the list. And then there's some higher academic ones. And then of course the football ones. So, we'll see what happens. He already got accepted 2 days after he applied to one of them. So that tells you something. And then the one school that he is, I think, the most realistic shot of playing at is a really, really, really good academic school as well. And it's a D2. So I would be over the moon if that's where he ended up going, but we'll, gotta wait.
Is the process still the same, Vince? Like the applications, like, do you have to like submit an essay and do all this other stuff with like every single application?
Not every single one. So there's this thing called the Common App. Did they have that when you were a kid?
I don't think so.
So it's called the Common Application, essentially, and every school in the country accepts the Common App. So you fill out all your stuff one time, you fill out an essay question in the Common App, and then that goes with it to the school. Now, higher academic schools require more, more essays. Yes. Yeah. More essays, supplemental essays, etc. So like Notre Dame, for example, had 3 additional essays that he had to do. Another academic school you had to do a page-long essay about something else. But most of them, it's just click. You've applied.
It felt like all of mine, I had to do a different sort of essay for every single application. I was like, can't we just recycle the same old
Seriously, and that's
You
where
know?
the Common App comes into play. So it's actually really nice. The problem is you Common App for applications, then you got another website to get your transcripts sent there.
That was another thing.
Naviance, I believe, is the name of that. And then you got another website if you want your SAT scores to get sent there.
Yep.
That's College Board. So you
Yep.
got 3 different websites. It's something, man. It is something.
Yeah, but then if you build up a list of 10 to 15 schools, now that's like 30 to 45 different things that you got to get sent out
Correct.
in total. And it's like, come on.
Yep. And then you got application fees. They charge you to send your SAT
Yeah, the
scores to
fee.
schools.
The other thing, it's like you're literally charging me to try to get into college. Like, what world are we living in right now?
I know. You're not wrong, dude. You're not wrong. So, but we'll see what happens, man. Like, we'll find out a lot here in December 15th, I think, is when most of the decisions come down. And then hopefully there'll also be some offers in there as well. So we'll keep you all posted. Don't worry. You guys are all part
if there's
of
anything
the family.
Vince can't do, it's keep a secret.
Although I'm keeping a pretty big secret at the moment, but I'll keep that to myself. I'll tell you later. All right, Jesse. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right, man. All right, let's see here. Got to get to the right tab. Okay. The fact that Pro Football Focus put out a tweet today that Riley Leonard is the 4th highest graded quarterback in the country since week 3. Do you buy or sell that Leonard is a Heisman candidate because of this?
Yeah, I do believe that Riley Leonard is a Heisman candidate, and I think that you have to kind of overlook where he was at the beginning of the season, coming off injury, not having a lot of time in camp, combined with a new offensive coordinator, his first time at a new school. Like, that was just a big old kind of cocktail that would lead to kind of a slow start. But like you said, since the NIU loss, essentially, Riley Leonard has been basically the 4th best quarterback in the country, right? And I know a lot of people, when they think of Heisman and think of quarterback, they think of guys airing the ball out, lots of passing yards, lots of passing touchdowns, etc. But, I still look at it as overall productivity. Are you moving the ball down the field? Are you protecting the ball? And are you scoring touchdowns? Riley Leonard still has scored touchdowns with his feet. He is now starting to throw touchdowns through the air, and he's just overall become more and more comfortable in this offense. And when you think of Heisman, you also have to think of team success as well. Where would Notre Dame be without Riley Leonard at quarterback, right? I think that Riley Leonard being at quarterback only helps their really dynamic running game. I think it helps their defense because of, the way that they are able to hold the ball, run the ball, keep the defense off the field, keep them fresh, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, I know that Riley Leonard doesn't make these, amazing wow throws and touchdown passes and all that stuff. But to me, he protects the ball. He still finds a way to get the run game going. He still finds a way to get the ball into the end zone. They're one of the best offenses in the red zone. They're one of the most efficient teams in the red zone. So all those things combined, I mean, I would, and this, if Notre Dame continues, to win out and Riley Leonard's game continues to elevate as Notre Dame keeps winning, I don't see why there isn't any reason that he shouldn't be considered in that final Heisman conversation.
I think the key to the question here is he a candidate? I've seen his name on some lists over the last couple of days, coming off of the Navy win. It's amazing how all of a sudden Notre Dame's getting credit after beating Navy, which is just a strange world that we live in. But I'm starting to see his name on some lists and that he's a contender. I think he's a contender. He's a candidate. He's not a top candidate yet. I don't think that right now, if the season ended, that he would get an invite to New York or anything like that. But he's got a few games coming up here. And obviously, it is Florida State, but it is a night game. So it's going to be in prime time. So he's going to have a chance to make some noise, in a week and a half, right? And then that USC game is going to be massive. I think that USC game is going to be big. Look, they're going to have Army, obviously, where they're going to have he's going to have a chance to beat a ranked team, and that's going to be all well and good. And if they still get the same boost that they got after the Navy game, then I guess that's going to be great. But I really do think it comes down to how do you play on the road when everything is on the line in that final game of the season, because everybody's going to be watching. It's going to be a big one. regardless of whatever USC does between now and then, between now and Thanksgiving, that's going to be a big game. And so I think he could play himself into an invitation at that point, but he could also play himself out of an invitation at that point if he continues playing the way he played this on this 3-game stretch. I think he could be in that conversation come, the final week of the season. And that last game is going to be crucial to that. But right now he's a candidate. He's in the neighborhood. He's a candidate. I'm not saying he's going to win. And some things are going to have to go poorly for some of these other guys for him to kind of leapfrog them too. So, it's not
right now
in his control.
On FanDuel, he has about the 20th best odds at plus 15,000. Okay. I'm gonna name some quarterbacks in front of him, and I want you to realistically tell me if you believe that they should
Riley Leonard should be higher or whatever.
Just maybe in the same conversation, right?
Okay.
Like I think there's some quarterbacks who I'm like, all right, like I don't think they're better than Riley Leonard. And I think the other one's like, all right, we can maybe disagree, but they're probably in the same ballpark, right? So let's see. Let me find Riley Leonard on this list. I just had it. Okay, so Diego Pavia, the Vanderbilt quarterback, is currently ahead of Notre Dame. I
think Riley Leonard's a better player, but Pavia's had more headlines.
Oh, Iowa State quarterback is ahead of him. Will Howard from Ohio State is ahead of him. Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Garrett Nussmeier, Shadou Sanders, Drew Aller from Penn State. Like,
Nussmeier's not a better quarterback than Riley Leonard.
I think the one that really sticks out to me is Cade Klubnik has the 5th best odds to win the Heisman right now.
5th best odds to win the Heisman?
To win the Heisman, he has the 5th best odds. And I'm like,
wow.
First of all, who has Clemson played since that Georgia game, right?
Holy smoky.
I am like, you could not sell me Cade Klubnik at all right now. I am not bought in on him one bit. So, I still think there is a good amount of quarterbacks on paper ahead of Riley Leonard, but I'd still consider Riley Leonard a top 10 quarterback in college football right now. And especially, probably top 5 in the last 8 games or 6 or 7 games or so. But I don't understand the Klubnik love. And that's largely who that question was geared around. Is he somehow has the 5th best odds, but Riley Leonard's nuts. At like the 20th best odds.
That's crazy to me. That is nuts. All right, let's move on. It was announced today that Notre Dame will travel to Miami on Labor Day weekend in 2025. So scale of 1 to 10, your excitement level for that game to kick off the Irish season.
Yeah, I'm 10 out of 10 on this one. I'm upset that they couldn't play Miami this season. Right. I think it would be another nice data point on the resume and a team that they would likely beat. But, next season, you're opening the season with Miami. We're talking about 2 teams right now who are projected to be in the college football playoff, right? And so, you're talking about probably 2 college playoff teams, maybe an ACC champion, and maybe, 2 teams that make some sort of run in the college football playoffs. So my excitement level for that, it's like the equivalent of Texas A&M, but it's the U, right? Like there's more bad blood with the U. So I really like this because I think both programs are at an apex, right? Like both of them are really good. And I think it makes sense for both of them to kind of play at this point. To play to open next season.
No, I'm excited about it. It's a 10 for me as well. I think this is a classic opponent for Notre Dame. I think, it was a little bit out of Miami's control that they didn't play this year. I would have loved to see that game this year. You want to talk about a resume builder. I still think Notre Dame wins that game. But going into next year, there's no Cam Ward, who's going to be the quarterback at Miami. I think that's kind of, something that we'll have to discuss in the offseason. We're going to have plenty of time to break down Miami and Notre Dame, obviously, since it's week 1. But no, I think this is great. And Notre Dame gets to go on the road week 1. I think that's fantastic because everybody is going to say that they can't win on the road. And we're just going to hear the same old things that we heard before and how good Miami is and it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
It's even more fun because these 2 teams could play in the playoff and it could be one of the other teams. True. Essentially there's a chance that one of these teams could play the other back to back. Because they lost to him in the playoff.
Then you open up with them
and then they had to
next
open.
year.
Yeah, so I think there's also some fun potential around that.
Look at you. Look at you. Look, both teams are going to be breaking in a new quarterback, so that'll be fun as well. So I think that game could be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that one. I might have to I'm not going to have a kid playing high school football anymore, so maybe I'll have to get on a plane and go to Miami. It would be terrible. So, but anyway, yeah, it's a 10 for me as well. That should be a fun one. That should be a good. I'm glad they're doing that week 1. That's going to be a good one. All right, college football playoff. We're talking about it. So, better chance of being a 1-bid league, the ACC or the Big 12?
I have to go the ACC. If the season ended today, Clemson and Miami would probably get in. And if the season ended today, Iowa State and BYU would probably get in. So right now you're looking at probably 2 teams from each. I don't think Clemson is going to make it at the end. I think it's either going to be Clemson or Miami. I don't think both of those teams make it. And I don't know what they're going to do. Like if there's an undefeated Big 12 team and a 1-loss Big 12 team, I don't know if that Big 12 team will get in. So I don't know. This is a tough question. The more that I think about it, because it's basically, who do you believe more in, Iowa State or BYU or Miami and Clemson?
Right. I agree.
So initially I said ACC, but the more I think about it, I think Miami and Clemson have a bit more kind of meat on the bone compared to Iowa State and BYU. And at least Clemson has Dabo Swinney, a guy who's experienced in winning high leverage games in the playoffs, etc. And the thing Miami has is a stud at quarterback, right? So I think that could get them pretty far against those other Big 12 schools. So again, I did my classic talk in a circle and probably talked myself out of my original answer. But I think the Big 12 is now my final answer.
The Big 12 was going to be my answer all along. I feel like the 2 ACC teams are better than the 2 Big 12 teams. I mean, that's what it comes down to for me. Now you got to take into account schedules and remaining schedule and wins and losses and all of that stuff and what that could potentially look like, obviously. But just looking at the teams themselves, I like Clemson and Miami over Kansas State and BYU. We'll see how it all plays out. Look, there's a chance they could both be 2-bid teams or leagues. There's a chance they could both be 1-bid leagues. I mean, and then obviously the in-between of one of them being 2 and one of them being a 1. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those 2 leagues shake out, because again, that's going to affect Notre Dame, right? If one of these teams that has a couple of losses steals a bid, that affects Notre Dame. That bumps them down or that bumps them out potentially. So, ideally, you want both of these leagues to be 1-bid leagues if you're a Notre Dame fan. That way there's more of a chance of Notre Dame getting in. So, but I think if you're making me choose, and I wrote the question, so I guess I'm making myself choose, I'm going to go with the Big 12 being the 1-bid league and the ACC getting in 2. All right, let's see where we're at here. All right. So this was an interesting one. The 2 Jamokes at the Yankee game, the brothers that interfered with the foul ball last night. The whole situation is blank to you.
The whole situation to me is a bunch of pathetic losers. I was watching that game last night.
Oh, that's great.
And I saw Mookie go over and it was like, what is going on? And all of a sudden the ball just popped out and they zoom in and I mean, Vince, I think the Yankee fans are probably the only people in the world who would do this at a baseball game. Like, I've never seen someone grab a player by their wrist and glove, pull on it, and then try to pry open his glove to get the ball out. Like, that was really going to do something. The reason this really pisses me off the most is, what if Mookie Betts would have broke his wrist or tore a ligament in his wrist because 2 jabronis are just yanking on his wrist over the stands, trying to get a ball out that he's clearly already caught, right? Like, if I'm Mookie Betts, I'm taking my glove and I'm smacking the hell out of them across the face with it. Like, I just like they are so lucky that this wasn't an NBA game because I guarantee one of those NBA players would have like grabbed them and pulled them onto the field. And you know what I mean? Like they're lucky it was Mookie Betts at the end of the day, because if it were me, and again, someone like they're playing in the World Series and you could be risking injury and amongst all the other things that are going on, like I just think it's completely unacceptable. And I hope they were thrown out of the game. I didn't get to see if they were or not, but
I believe they were.
I was just so caught off guard that you really thought that that's something that you could do, like,
yeah.
And again, when you consider the fact that you could have injured someone who's in the World Series, it's just so selfish, and it just shows how stupid Yankee fans are.
Let me ask you a question, because when you think of Yankee fans, is it not those two idiots that you think of? Now, granted, I'm not a Yankee fan, obviously, but like, just like the Brooklyn, like,
Yeah, if you put up a sign that had two Yankee idiot fans on it, that's likely the definition that you'd see. Like if you went into the dictionary and it was like a Yankee fan, there'd be a picture of those guys right there.
I mean, straight out of Central Casting. If you don't like the Yankees, those are the two guys that you think about when you think of a Yankee fan. I realize there are wonderful Yankee fans out there, just like there are wonderful fans of every team. But those two jokers are exactly what I envision when I think of a Yankee fan. Like when I think of a New York, when I think of a New York fan, it's that idiot right there. We took the ball out of his glove. We did it, man. We did it for New York. That's what we did. Like that's, oof, man, what a bunch of idiots. Like that was, I just can't even, like, where does that even register in your brain when you're thinking about how you're going to influence a game, when you're sitting there, the ball's coming your way, like, oh, I'm going to take the ball out of his glove. Like, come on, dude. That was awful.
I'm serious. Like, I don't like those guys. I think Mookie Betts has every right. Like, if Mookie would have retaliated, I think he had every right at the end of the day.
I know, right?
I can't. Maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I can't believe that happened. I can't believe fans really thought that that's something that they should do in a game, let alone a World Series game. And I guess I'm just thinking, like, what's the outcome? You get the ball, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know what the end goal was, where you have someone by their wrist and you're literally trying to pry their glove open just to get a baseball out of it. Just go to the team store and buy a baseball.
He didn't even get the ball. The ball went back on the field. It's just something else. Yeah. And there's a big difference, by the way, from this kid, Jeffrey Mayer. That's who they're talking about. Remember way back when he reached over and got the ball and he became like this instant celebrity. Are you too old for that? Are you too young for that? Do you remember when that happened? The Yankee fan that like reached over and got the ball and whatever. Like, he didn't pry the ball out of somebody's glove or hold down their arms. Like, he just reached over and brought the ball into the stands out of the air. And I'll add, these guys were adults. That kid was a kid. Massive difference to me. Like, massive difference. Child to adult, and the manner in which they went after it. You know what I mean? So I just want to clarify the difference. Like, you cannot compare these two guys to a child. You can't do it. You can't do it. So
that was 1996 between the Yankees and the Orioles. So I was.
How old were you in 96?
Wasn't born yet.
Okay.
Well, no. If it's the 96 World Series, then I was maybe like 9 months old. But I looked it up. It basically looked like a home run. He reached over,
and he
caused it to be a home run, basically.
Correct. Yeah, correct. But he's a child. Like, he was a child. These two guys last night were grown adults, doing this, and they accosted the player in the meantime. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, massive difference. And yes, for everybody out there that may be upset that we're picking on Yankee fans, every fan base has plenty of jabronis. It
just feels like the Yankees got the most. That's all I'm saying.
So you went there, and I like it. I like it. I definitely like it. DK says Jesse was born in 2012. Jesse was not born in 2012. He was a junior in high school in 2012.
That's correct.
because I remember that season very, very well. So that's why I remember that you were a junior in high school. But all right, anyway,
Best
we got
season ever in
Yes, it
Adams
was.
history.
It was the best season ever until it wasn't. Like that's how that season went. I think about that every year when it gets to be this time of year. By the way,
Really,
every
that game,
single year.
our
Yes.
one chance.
Yes, we could have written all of our names down in the history books of that high school.
You know what the fun part about that one is that core group. Like I had known it came from Edison Middle School.
It's true.
You know, like that core group, we'd been together since like 5th and 6th grade, right? And it was something we talked about all the time because we knew where we were going for high school. We knew what the track record was for football. And we were like, guys, like we're going to be the ones to kind of, alter the course. And it wasn't just us. There were a lot of pieces from other schools.
Oh, sure.
But that core was largely around guys that I'd been around for a good amount of time. So
the quarterback and the tight end came from Catholic school.
And running back came from a different public school.
That's true too.
But we all knew each other then.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, of course. Plus, you guys have been playing together for 3 years, at that point too. So,
right.
So there is that. Josh wants to know how old you are. I think we should make him do the math. If you were a junior in high school in 2012, in the fall of 2012.
I was born in 96 and we're in 2024.
Yeah.
Subtract those two numbers.
That's a lot of math. All right. So, hey, we're talking about the World Series, so we'll just keep this one real simple. So far, the World Series is blank.
So far, the World Series is great for a fan like me because I want to see the Yankees lose, and I really wanted to see the Yankees get swept. I know it's two big markets, but what Freddie Freeman is doing and continued to do last night by hitting another home run in the World Series, it's electric to me. And you still get to see some of the best players in the game between Ohtani, Freeman, Judge, Soto. So, this World Series has been, it's been great because I have been privileged enough to see some of the best players in our game on the highest stage. And at the same time, simultaneously, the Yankees just keep on losing. So for me, it's a pretty good World Series.
I'll be honest, I haven't watched any of the World Series, so just neither one of those teams interests me. I know they're big market teams. I am such a fair weather fan when it comes to watching outside of the Super Bowl and the NFL playoffs, because I do watch those regardless of who's playing. But when it comes to any other sport, I am such a fair weather fan when it comes to, the postseason, I guess I should say. And that's pretty specific to baseball. If the Cubs are out, and they usually are, I'm probably not watching the postseason. So I haven't watched any of the postseason. And honestly, this year, it feels like a lot of the World Series games have been conflicting with either a football game or something else that I've wanted to watch or do or whatever. You know what I mean? So, I just haven't watched any of the World Series. I guess I'm going to have to pay attention because tonight could be the last one, right?
Yeah, it's if you you're in a good spot. It's always good to watch the last one because at least you can get kind of caught up with everything.
Yeah, right. So I guess I'm going to have to tune in tonight to see what happens. But, got stuff to do tonight, so we'll see if I can even make that happen. So, but anyway, Jesse, thanks for hanging out with me tonight. Appreciate you very, very much. Those of you who are women's basketball fans, there's a women's basketball game on in 28 minutes. So you might want to tune into the radio or on Odyssey because I'm pretty sure it's not televised. But you can check it out. It's going to be a banner season for the women. And this will be our first look at what they're going to look like. And you can hear the dulcet tones of Sean Stiers with the play-by-play. So definitely going to want to tune into that. But thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us for a little Wednesday edition of the football midweek mailbag. Appreciate everybody hanging out. So for Jesse, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown